You ever watch the news and hear, the government just spent $5 billion on something stupid? And you're sitting there like, cool, I just got declined for a $5 coffee. Yeah, same. Meanwhile, they're talking trillions like it's monopoly money. And everyone's panicking. We're drowning in debt. But here's the kicker. Almost every country on Earth has debt. India, Germany, even Switzerland, the country that basically runs on chocolate and precision. Even Qatar, where gas is cheaper than water. Japan owes double its entire economy. And the US? A chill $36 trillion and climbing like it's trying to reach the moon. So why? Why are countries in debt? Why don't they just print more money? And seriously, who are they even borrowing from? Aliens. Let's break it down. Section 1. What is national debt? Okay, imagine your country is a person. Let's call them Dave. Dave earns money, that's taxes. Dave spends money, that's literally everything else like healthcare, education, and public services. But sometimes, Dave spends more than he earns. So what does he do? He borrows. Just like you do when your bank account says $12.47 and your rent says, not today. Only difference. They don't swipe a plastic card. They borrow from millions of people, banks, and other nations. That total amount is called national debt, or public debt, or sovereign debt, take your pick. Think of it like a giant group tab at a restaurant. Everyone chips in by lending a few bucks, and the government promises to pay back plus interest. That's national debt. It's when the central government borrows money to keep the lights on. Now here's a twist. This only counts the federal government's debt. So when we say US, national debt, we're talking Washington, we're not talking about California's state debt or your cousin Dave's student loans, just Uncle Sam's bill. And no, your credit card balance and mortgage aren't part of it. Got it? Great. But wait, why borrow in the first place? Why don't they just print unlimited money and send it around like flyers at a concert? Well, buckle up for the next chapter. Section 2. Why do countries borrow money? Now you might say, wait, why not just print more money? That, my friend, is how you go from a functioning economy to my grocery bill is $400 trillion. Printing too much money is like watering down soup. At first it seems like more, but it tastes like regret. Too much cash equals inflation. Extreme cash equals hyperinflation. Hyperinflation equals your life savings buys you a banana. That's exactly what happened in Venezuela and Zimbabwe. Hyperinflation's so bad that a loaf of bread cost a wheelbarrow full of bills. So instead, borrowing keeps governments honest. Debt comes with interest, meaning if you borrow $1 billion, you eventually owe $1 billion plus a little extra. That little extra forces you to budget instead of going on a wild spending spree. Kind of like a gym membership. You only take it seriously once it's hurting your wallet. 1. Covering budget deficits. Governments collect taxes, income taxes, sales taxes, property taxes, but sometimes it's not enough to cover everything. Defense, social programs, infrastructure. When expenses exceed revenue, they borrow to fill the gap. Simple as that. 2. Investing in growth. Borrowing isn't always a sign of trouble. Imagine your country has $0 but desperately needs roads, schools, hospitals. Build those now instead of waiting a decade to save up. Roads cut travel time. Schools produce smarter workers. Hospitals keep people healthy. All of that boosts the economy, which means more tax revenue down the road, making it easier to pay off that original loan. Debt, when used wisely, can be a launchpad. It's like taking a loan to go to med school. Painful now, pays off later. 3. Handling crises and emergencies. Natural disasters, wars, pandemics. When catastrophe strikes, patience isn't an option. In 2020, the U.S. borrowed almost $3.8 trillion, about 18% of its GDP, just to send stimulus checks and prop up businesses during COVID-19. Without that borrowing, the economy could have collapsed and millions more people would have lost their jobs. 4. Rolling over old debt. Here's a trick governments have mastered. Sometimes they borrow new money to pay off old loans. If your 2010 loan matures in 2020 and you can't cover it, you take out a new 2020 loan to settle the 2010 debt. Rinse and repeat. This is okay if the economy grows faster than the debt, but it can become a runaway train if not managed properly. Ask, Sri Lanka in 2022. 5. Controlling inflation and interest rates. Debt can also be a financial tool, not just a lifeline. When inflation is surging, governments issue bonds to soak up cash, cooling down the economy. When the economy's slow, they borrow and spend, injecting liquidity to spark growth. Think of bonds as pressure valves, open to let cash out, close to trap cash in. It's like adjusting the thermostat on a house. Too hot or too cold, you tweak the system to find just right. So borrowing isn't inherently evil. It's about how you use it. Next, who's actually writing these massive checks? Section 3. Who lends money to countries? You might think a single giant bank has $36 trillion lying around. But nope, governments borrow from 3 main buckets: domestic lenders, foreign lenders, and their own central bank. 1. Domestic lenders. You and me, for instance. When we buy government bonds or treasury bills, we're basically loaning money to our country. In return, the government promises to pay us back plus interest, usually in a few years. Banks, pension funds, mutual funds, and even government agencies like Social Security do the same. In March 2025, about $7.3 trillion, around 20% of U.S. national debt, was owed to these intragovernment sources. 2. Foreign lenders. Yep, your neighbor across the globe can lend to your government. Countries like China and Japan hold hundreds of billions in U.S. treasuries. Think of them as parking their cash in what they see as safe investments. If an economy is shaky, investors get nervous. That's why weaker countries usually borrow from institutions like the World Bank or Asian Development Bank, which offer lower interest rates but with strings attached, like policy conditions. When an economy is really desperate, and no one else will lend, they march to the IMF's door. The IMF isn't about financing new roads. It's like a financial ICU, short-term emergency loans to prevent collapse. But IMF money comes with major stipulations: tax hikes, spending cuts, privatization orders that can spark protests. Ask Greece or Argentina. 3. Central bank. Technically, a government can borrow directly from its own central bank by printing new money, a process called monetizing debt. But that's a fast track to hyperinflation. Instead, central banks often buy government bonds indirectly. First, commercial banks buy them. Then the central bank steps in and buys those bonds on the secondary market. That influences interest rates and money supply without turning every dollar into wallpaper. Now that you know who's on the lending hook, let's tackle the big question. Is national debt a bad thing? Section 4. Is national debt a bad thing? Here's where things get spicy. Debt isn't automatically bad. It's like fire. Use it right, and it cooks your food. Use it wrong, and your house burns down. Good debt builds stuff, helps during emergencies, boosts the economy. Bad debt pays off other bad debt, or gets spent with no return. When is debt good? Smart investments. If you borrow to build highways, schools, or renewable energy plants, you're investing in your economy's future. More jobs, better services, higher productivity. That growth can outpace the cost of borrowing. Crisis management. Emergencies demand quick cash. Borrowing lets governments bridge gaps, keep businesses afloat, and prevent mass unemployment. When is debt dangerous? The debt trap. If you borrow just to pay off existing debt, without actually stimulating growth, you can spiral down. Interest payments start gobbling more of your budget than programs like healthcare or defense. Losing investor confidence. Think of credit ratings like a country's financial GPA. When investors doubt repayment, the rating drops, borrowing costs soar, and suddenly you're in a financial death spiral. That's how Sri Lanka defaulted on $51 billion in 2022. Public protests, political chaos, economic collapse. So how much is too much debt? Economists often look at the debt-to-GDP ratio. That's simply total debt divided by annual economic output. If your country's GDP is $100 billion and debt is $60 billion, you have a 60% debt-to-GDP ratio. Many say 60% or less is safe, but there's no one-size-fits-all number. Some countries run ratios well above that, Japan's over 200%, and still manage. Others collapse at lower levels if they can't service their debt or face sudden shocks. In places like the U.S., there's even a legal debt ceiling, a cap on how much the government can owe. But every time they hit it, Congress just raises the ceiling to avoid default. It's a political poker game that rarely ends well in the headlines. Section 5. Can a country be debt-free? Technically, sure. In reality, almost never, and maybe that's a feature, not a bug. No sovereign nation today is completely debt-free. The closest case is Macau, but it's not fully independent. It's a special administrative region of China, so its finances roll up into Beijing's. Macau's tiny, about 700,000 people, and rakes in casino billions, so living debt-free is like winning the lottery every quarter. Most countries aren't tiny casino hotspots, but let's say a country truly wiped out every cent of debt. On paper that's great, but the ripple effect could be terrifying. Massive spending cuts or tax hikes. To eliminate debt, you'd have to slash social programs, infrastructure projects, or hike taxes so high your economy stall. Picture schools closing, hospitals downsizing, mass protests in the streets, like a recession on steroids. No government bonds. Bonds are a bedrock for low-risk investing. Pension funds, retirement accounts, and insurance companies rely on government bonds as a safe harbor. Without them, these institutions would be forced into riskier bets, stock market crashes, volatile commodities, making retirements less secure and markets jittery. So most governments decide a manageable amount of debt is better than none. It's like using a mortgage to buy a house. It's not free money, but it's a tool to build something valuable today, rather than waiting until you can save up the full price. Conclusion: the truth about national debt. National debt isn't some evil monster lurking under the economy. It's a tool, like a knife, useful in the hands of a chef, dangerous in the hands of a toddler. So next time someone yells, "Why is our country in debt?" you can calmly say, "Because it makes sense, if you use it right." And hey, if you're wondering why some countries survive massive debt while others collapse, that's a story for another day, maybe in the next video. Smash that like button, drop your hottest debt take in the comments, and subscribe for more money made simple, stick figure style. Catch you next time.